What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to yet another edition of Touchline Talk right here on 110 Sports. Fulham. I mean, welcome back to the Premier League. Congratulations. Didn't think it was going to happen, in all honesty. But the one thing I said going into that championship playoff final at Wembley was that's the team that's been there before. And you saw it with the way that they just sort of managed the game. And full credit to Scott Parker because he inherited a mess. And he got some. They were never staying up at the Premier League by the time he got that job. But they got a little bit of momentum. They put together some better performances so that they had some confidence going into this season as they went back into the championship. They weren't, at the same level as your West Broms and your Leeds this year, but they were the fourth best team in the championship over the regular season. And so you put yourself in a position, you get to the playoff final, and it's one game against a very good Brentford team, but a team that Fulham is capable of beating. And all of a sudden, you're back in the Premier League and the complexion of your club changes. Wasn't a particularly exciting game. I was disappointed in Brentford's inability to create chances. It's always going to be a much more cautious, tentative game when you're playing for a spot in the Premier League and the stakes are that high. But I expected more from Brentford. I was disappointed in their overall performance. But at the same time, some credit to Fulham for just being solid defensively. But really, the story of this game is is the extra time and what Joe Bryan did. You look at all of these guys who could have made a difference in this game and could have been the player to send their team to the Premier League. From Brentford's attacking options to a Josh Da Silva in their midfield. I talked about Tom Kearney. You've had all kinds of weapons for Fulham, specifically Alexander Mitrovic, Bobby Reed. And it's Joe Bryan that makes the difference from his left back position. I think we need to give him credit for that free kick more than we need to criticize David Raya. Yes, David Raya was out of position and made himself look silly and should have saved that. That's not in question at all. But at the same time, to be able to execute a free kick like that, to get it to bounce like that, it was just really good from Bryan. I think both can be true at the same time. That was a really good free kick, and David Raya got caught cheating. He was leading to the other side, and he left that open, and Joe Bryan took advantage. It's not just one or the other. I think it's a combination of the two. But the goal I want to talk about more is actually the second one. Not because it was necessarily of a higher quality, but because until Joe Bryan made that first run, Fulham weren't doing anything. They were just kind of holding the ball up as you would when you're winning in a playoff final in extra time, just trying to survive. There was nothing wrong with what they were doing. And so he makes this run, and Kearney slips him the ball. And then he plays the 1-2 with Mitrovic, and all of a sudden he's through. And it's a very, very good finish from him again. But my question is just this. How many left backs are actually going to make that run and have the courage to go forward like that in that situation? And in many ways, it was probably not intelligent. But when you're playing Brentford, I think you absolutely have to play that way. Too many times teams get passive in that kind of situation where they're just scared to do anything that's going to put them at risk of giving up a goal when you're just trying to see out a game for, 15, 20 minutes or whatever it is. Whether that's at the end of end of regulation or whether that's in extra time, whatever it might be. But if Joe Bryan doesn't have the courage to make that run and doesn't think positively and look at trying to get a second goal as a defender by trade, then you're going to a shootout because Brentford got that goal back. I don't think, for both Bryan's brilliance and Raya's error, that first goal is getting all of the the discussion and the praise and the criticism and the attention. But to me, there's just not that many left backs that are going to think that way in that situation. And that's the decision that ended up actually winning Fulham this game. Maybe they go on and win in the shootout, who knows. But it was Joe Bryan not being satisfied with just one goal, of trying to finish off the game, get the second one, so that even if something weird happens like the goal that Brentford got, you're still fine because you got that second goal. So to me, that was the most impressive. I mean, he stole the show, obviously. But to me, that was the most impressive part of it that I wanted to at least start with and recognize is that was a mentality thing. He wanted that second goal. He was thinking, go forward, how can I join the attack, when his team really wasn't. And all of a sudden, Mitrovic knows he's making that run and sees him and lays it off to him, and he has a very good finish, and it's 2-0, and that's pretty much the game. Tough for Brentford. 0-9 in finals. I mean, at some point, just the math says they got to win one of these things, and they're going to be one of the favorites to go up again next season. The question becomes, how many of these really good attacking pieces can you hold on to? Can you hold on to Ollie Watkins? Can you hold on to Saeed Benrahma? It's probably going to be where they lose one or two, but not all of them, which means they're going to be one of the better teams in the championship again next season. But that's the next step for them, is what happens with this team. They've sort of come to the realization and accepted they're not going to be able to hold on to everybody, but how much do you lose? What kind of reinforcements can you bring in? Who can step up? It was a phenomenal season. They're a very good team. It's just when you get into this situation, it's one moment. A moment of brilliance from Joe Bryan and a poor goalkeeping mistake from David Raya, and all of a sudden you're missing out on going to the Premier League. In other Premier League news, I want to touch on a couple things, and then we're going to talk about the Portland Timbers win over the Philadelphia Union last night. But the Premier League has decided next season they're only going with 3 subs. We talked about this a while back, but the overarching rule is that you can have 5, that every league gets to decide. And so this was up to the Premier League whether they wanted to continue with 5, which everybody did for obvious reasons during the restarts that have been happening. But now you go into the next season where it's a little bit different, where you've got a transfer window to build squad, so it's not like you're going to decimate these teams and that they were planning to have to do whatever, and all of a sudden, you've got time to work with whatever the rule is going to be. So all I said that I'm sticking with is, okay, we made this, just make the decision. And to the Premier League's credit, the Premier League made the decision. So now you've got this full transfer window to go build your squads, get reinforcements, knowing that you're playing with 3 subs next year. I don't have an issue with it. I don't have strong feelings either way. But the earlier this could get done, the better, so that now your Sean Dyches of the world know that you're playing with 3, that Manchester City can't bring in 5 world-class talents off the bench, that kind of thing. That was what was important to me, so props to the Premier League for figuring it out. I'm going to be curious to see if other leagues follow suit now. I kind of feel like they will, but there's also an argument that because of this short break, and Frank Lampard's already talking about how he wants more rest for his team, because some of these teams are going to go, deep into the Champions League and the Europa League and then turn around in a couple weeks and start their season again. So there's absolutely justification for sticking with 5 subs. But the Premier League's decided to go with 3. I don't have an issue with it. The other news that's coming out, it sounds like Willian is on his way to Arsenal, which is very interesting for so many different reasons. But the thing I want to say here is I am a huge Willian fan. I feel like I am higher on him than most other people. And I said when we talked about him becoming the first player to score in every calendar month in the Premier League, somebody's going to really benefit from his services next year. And it sounds like Chelsea tried to keep him, but just couldn't get the deal done. But the first thing I was going to say is that this in any way inhibits Arsenal from getting that Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang deal done. It's a massive mistake, but it sounds like they are inches away from getting an Aubameyang extension across the line, so it doesn't look like it's going to hurt there. But the other question I still have is how much is Arsenal going to be willing to invest in that defense, that midfield, of just freshening things up and bringing in new players because they need them. If you're bringing in Willian at a exorbitant wage, not that he isn't worth it or not that he doesn't deserve it, but if you're bringing him in instead of looking at going to get some center backs, getting another playmaker, or figuring out a way to get a permanent deal done for Danny Ceballos, whatever it might be, it's a massive mistake. They don't need Willian. Willian is a nice piece to have in addition to Pepe, Aubameyang, Lacazette, Saka, etc. It's not that they can't use him or that he's not going to contribute to this team. But if this is the choice that they're making instead of looking at other areas, not a fan at all. But if this is step one, and step two is the Aubameyang contract, and step three is bringing a couple more central defenders and another midfielder, I'm all for it. If you have the financial backing to do this, if Arteta's gotten approval to make this part of a bigger plan, then I really like this. It brings something different. And now you've got two real weapons on free kicks with Pepe and Willian. Like I said, I'm a huge Willian fan. I think he's great and can absolutely still contribute. But there's only so much value he brings when Arsenal already have other guys that do some of the things that he does, particularly Pepe and just attacking players. They've got enough of those already. That's not the question with this team. Aubameyang is spectacular. And they got other pieces to go around him. So that's where I am with Willian. It's just my thoughts on this deal depend on what happens next. Because if you're just spending this money to go bring in another name and another attacking weapon, you don't need it. You want to get back in the Champions League, you got to do smarter business. So we'll see where Arsenal go from here. But I did want to mention both of those things as well. And now we get to Major League Soccer, MLS's back tournament, where the Portland Timbers have clinched their spot in the final. A very strange game in many ways, particularly with all of the drama at the end. But I want to start and focus on the first half of this game. We'll talk about the goal that was or was not, that ended up playing a significant role. But what I said on Tuesday, this is a fascinating tactical matchup because neither of these teams want the ball. They both want to do the same thing, which is absorb pressure and hit you on the counter. They want to play fast. They want to play through you. They don't need the ball. And so my question was, which team gets stuck with the ball? And when Kai Wagner lets Jeremy Abobasi run right by him in the first 15 minutes of the game to have an easy header to put the Timbers up on a corner kick, that's the answer to the question. Portland got to do exactly what Portland wanted to do. Eric Williamson and Diego Char were spectacular in the middle of the midfield. Diego Char is the best in the league at just winning the ball, messing things up, frustrating opponents. He's brilliant at it. And so Giovanni Savarese, I feel like he's not getting enough credit for how good of a coach he is. They are incredibly well organized. They're a well-drilled machine. And so when you go 1-0 down on a mistake that's yours, that was just a lack of attention and falling asleep, all of a sudden your task becomes much, much more difficult when you're a team like the Union who just don't play a possession-based system designed to break opponents down. This is not LAFC we're talking about here. And so Portland is very comfortable in the first half. Savarese is obviously thrilled with what's going on. And then the Union get their penalty kick. They get a break. And Sergio Santos steps up and he skies it over the goal. And that was the moment where I really didn't think the Union had any chance of winning this game. Because again, you're playing right into the Timbers' hands. If you get that goal, things look a little bit different. Portland now has to think about the fact that if you give up another goal, they are losing and on the verge of getting knocked out of this tournament. They can't just sit back and absorb pressure and hit you on the counter anymore. But Santos can't take advantage of the PK. So you go into the second half and the Union lose Sebastian Blanco on a corner. Again, another mental mistake. And so all of a sudden it's 2-0. And Union bring on El Sino, but nothing's really happening. Then the strange sequence of events where Shibilko almost scores, and then Andrew Wooten comes in and scores, and then just a minute later, you have the controversial goal, no goal, where Shibilko is probably 2 inches offside. The assistant referee raises the flag. They go to VAR, and it does not get overturned. And the Union things got better in the last 15 minutes or so. But at the end of the day, the Timbers were the better team. The Timbers deserved to win this game. You can talk all you want about how the Union got unlucky that goal didn't count. But if you flip that and look at it from the Timbers' perspective, that would have been absolutely cruel to have that game go to a shootout. The Union were lifeless for 75 plus minutes. Had no ideas going forward because Jim Curtin's very open about this. They are not good at breaking teams down. That's not what they do. And so you saw that they looked very different when for the first time in this tournament they were trailing. But I also want to talk about this VAR example for a second because this is one of the few times I feel like VAR actually did what VAR is supposed to do. If we use it this way, which is there anything that you can sort of unanimously, collectively decide it was a mistake, that the referee looks at it and goes, I want that back, then let's overturn it. But if there's doubt and it's not literally clear and obvious, then let's let the referees ref the game like they always have. It needs to be used as a cushion and a safety net for referees. In all honesty, I think he was 2 centimeters offside. But even if you think he was on, if you're on the receiving end of that, if you're the Timbers and give up that goal, there is every reason to be asking what was so clear and obvious about that you decided to reverse the call. That's, to me, those are the calls that you just have to let stand. It's going to be unlucky and a little bit unfair sometimes because maybe in the next situation he's 2 centimeters onside, but you can't really confirm it. And so it's a good goal that isn't overturned because it's not clear and obvious. It's just the reality of the sport. There are judgment calls. Referees make mistakes. It's part of sports in general. I thought that was, if we're going to use it that way, that's how you make VAR effective and you make VAR consistent and make it logical and easy for people to understand. There was not a clear and obvious mistake there. I think the call was right, but that's not the question that VAR is supposed to be answering. Too often it starts answering, was it right or wrong? Was it a clear and obvious mistake? And it wasn't. So yes, the Union easily could have gotten back into this game and tied it up. But to me, and I think Jim Curtin's going to look at it the same way, that's not about the end of that game. It's about the 2 mistakes you made on set pieces. It's about the inability to convert a penalty kick. It's about the fact that the Timbers did exactly what they wanted to do for 75 plus minutes. And that Portland team is really good. Sebastian Blanco should be the MVP of this tournament, considering how far they've gone, even if they don't win. Unless Orlando get through, then maybe you've got a discussion for Nani, a case for Nani. So we'll see what happens tonight. But Blanco's been incredible. And so you start Diego Valeri this game. He gives you 2 goals off corner kicks. They're really good. And you get, again, Jeremy Abobasi just keeps scoring goals. I really like Niasgoda. You saw how technically gifted he is. He is a proven goal scorer. If you get him up to speed and you either play him in a 2 or you go back and forth or you start him over Abobasi, they've got some good pieces going forward. That midfield, the defensive midfield pairing of Williamson and Chara is just incredible. And they're good enough defensively. They just know exactly who they are, how they want to play. They kind of have this Seattle Sounders, which I'm sure Timbers fans won't want to hear, but they have that Sounders-esque thing where they're just difficult to play against. It's not always pretty, but it's so effective. And they are so good at what they are trying to do. And it was a bad matchup for the Union. And it could have been a bad matchup for Portland if Portland goes down in that game. It was a question of who was going to get stuck with the ball early and who was going to give up the first goal. The answer to both of those was the Union. That's why Portland is going through. Brendan Aronson had a tough time against Chara. Portland was simply the better team. Yeah, there was some controversy at the end. Yeah, Philly could have equalized and maybe a little unlucky not to. But Portland also easily could have been 3-4-0 up. Andre Blake was spectacular again. And if Nias Goda just takes that shot instead of trying to pass it to, I believe it was Andy Polo, or if Jack Elliott doesn't get back and save that third goal, it's 3-0, the game's over. The Timbers also were not clinical in front of goal. You can look at this a lot of ways, but at the end of the day, the better team won. And I I really like Portland's chances of finishing this thing off. They are so experienced, they're so intelligent, so well drilled. That transition from Caleb Porter to Giovanni Severese has been pretty seamless. They're just they know what they're doing. Got to give a lot of credit to them. It's a great run for Philly, but at the end of the day, Timbers deserving winners and are absolutely feeling good about their chances of claiming this strange trophy that we'll see how it's remembered in the future. But at the end of the day, you're trying to win trophies, and the Timbers are on the verge of doing just that. We're going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to focus on the Europa League. We're going to go through everything that happened yesterday, and then no supporters corner this week. I want to do something a little bit different with the Europa League and Champions League returning. Then we're going to have a massive what's next, all the stuff you need to be looking out for this weekend, more Europa League, Champions League, all of that good stuff. So when we come back, European competition time. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to Touchline Talk. As promised, the Europa League has returned. We have finally gotten back into European competition. Wasn't actually sure this was ever going to happen this year with all of the COVID chaos, but nevertheless, here we are. Europa League has resumed. Champions League is on the verge of resuming. So we're just going to go through all of yesterday's games, what you need to know, a little bit of background about these teams, and how things are shaping up as we get closer to the final of this tournament. So Manchester United got to rest all of their key guys, your Bruno Fernandes's, Paul Pogba's of the world. They put out a reserve squad against LASK, beat them, and won 7-1 on aggregate thanks to a 5-0 thumping in the first leg that got played before the shutdown. Very comfortable for Manchester United. Their reward is a meeting with Copenhagen in the quarterfinals. Copenhagen got 2 goals from Jonas Wind to defeat Istanbul Başakşehir. Now, 3-1 on aggregate. Copenhagen pretty comfortable. But what I would mention about this Başakşehir team is it's not necessarily a team that you have probably heard of, but it does feature former Premier League players Demba Ba, Gael Clichy, and Gökhan Inler. Inler had a brief spell at Leicester and was a established Swiss international. So there's some interesting names on this team that Copenhagen beat. That's really all I have to say about their opposition, but thought that was interesting. Copenhagen finished second in the Danish league, one of the perennial powers in that country. They have European experience. They're consistently in Europa Champions League. Usually end up in the Europa League, but they on a fairly consistent basis make the group stage of the Champions League. But this is just on a different level when you're playing Manchester United. So United, in terms of the opposition they could have drawn, they've got to feel pretty good about where they're at quarterfinals against Copenhagen. Shakhtar Donetsk get 3 goals in 5 minutes to see off Wolfsburg 5-1 on aggregate. It was sort of interesting for a little while, and then they just kept scoring goals. Both teams had a man sent off. Wolfsburg's was U.S. international John Brooks. A tough way to finish his season. Shakhtar's coming off their 4th straight Ukrainian domestic title. Again, another one of those teams that you see in the Champions League that usually drops down to the Europa League. They're going to get the winner of Basel and Frankfurt, which is probably going to be Basel. We'll get to that and what's next. But that's your quarterfinal matchup there. Romelu Lukaku and Christian Eriksen, who came on as a sub, both scored to put Inter Milan past Getafe. They played this game in Germany because they weren't able to play the first leg. So some of these, and you've got another one in Roma Sevilla coming up today. Most of these games got through a first leg, but some of them didn't. So this was a one-off. Inter's the better team. Finished 1 point behind Juventus in Italy, which sort of happened quietly because Juventus had clinched before that last game. It wasn't stressful for Juve. But this is a really good Inter Milan team that is absolutely one of the favorites to win this tournament, along with Manchester United. So when I'm talking about United feeling good about drawing Copenhagen, this is why. You've got the Inter Milans of the world still in this tournament as well. They play and not only do they have a Christian Eriksen, but your front two of Romelu Lukaku and Lautaro Martinez is spectacular. They're really good. So your teams that are through, Man U, Copenhagen, Shakhtar, Inter Milan, they're going to play the winner of Rangers and Leverkusen. Not exactly a terrifying proposition there. And the quarterfinals are all going to be in Germany. So once you get through this sort of strange, some teams played the first leg of their round of 16 matchup beforehand. Some played it, some didn't get to play it. It's just a weird, you got to figure out how to even things out. The Champions League's facing the same problem, which is we're going to get to in our massive what's next here in a minute. But it's just a strange sequence of events. But one more time. So Copenhagen, Manchester United in the quarterfinals. Shakhtar Donetsk is going to play the winner of Basel and Frankfurt. Inter Milan is going to play the winner of Rangers and Leverkusen. That was yesterday's games. And then we're gonna take another quick break here, and we're gonna come back with just an absolutely massive what's next. We've got MLS is back semifinal tonight, the second set of Europa League games, and the resumption of the Champions League. You're not gonna want to miss it. Don't go anywhere. We're taking another quick break, and then we'll be back with what's next. Welcome back to Touchline Talk. So this is going to be as involved as a as what next as we've ever had so far on the show. So here we go. Today, Thursday, August 6th. We'll start with the second MLS is Back semifinal. Minnesota United, Orlando City. Orlando, obviously one of the stories of this tournament just because they're playing at home, but it's not actually home because they don't really have an advantage. They've struggled throughout their history. They've never made the playoffs, but all of a sudden Oscar Pereira comes in. Nani is spectacular, and they're just rolling along, putting together good performance after good performance. There's every reason to think that they can win this game. They might even be the better team. But there are a couple specific injury questions on both sides that I want to talk about for a second here. For Orlando, it's Chris Mueller. I said from the very beginning of this tournament, I am a huge Chris Mueller believer. I don't think he got a fair shake under James O'Connor. But now all of a sudden you see Oscar Pereira come in, he's starting, and he is producing. It just seems to me that he just never got to be on the field enough, on a regular enough of a basis to show what he can do. Because he was always creating havoc, he was scoring some goals. He just never got that consistent playing time and just the confidence of being a regular starter. Now he's got that, but he got hurt in the quarterfinals, so he's questionable to play. And when you combine that injury with the absence of Dom Dwyer, all of a sudden that attack doesn't look quite as good. Yes, you still have Nani. Yes, you still have some midfield pieces, Pereira, etc. But you're looking at a Tasho Akindele up top. It's just not quite as lethal. And particularly when you get into a situation where you might be playing a Portland, Diego Chara can take care of Nani to the extent that anybody can take care of Nani in this league. So you got to get some other options. Chris Mueller is the kind of guy who can make a difference, even if he's just coming off the bench in this game. He's the kind of player that can come on and make a difference and win you a game. And he provides you something different if he's healthy to play in a final should Orlando advance. So, to me, Orlando will be okay if he doesn't start. But if he's completely unavailable, that's a big blow for them. On the other side, you've got, Minnesota has just sort of found a way here. You go without Ike Opara from the get-go of this tournament. He decides not to play. Then you lose Kevin Molino and Romain Métanire. And yet somehow Orlando is still in the semifinals. And Adrian Heath loves when people write his team off. And specifically this Minnesota team. So Hassani Dotson, another player I'm really high on, has stepped in, done a really good job. He needs U.S. national team conversation. He really does. He sort of came out of nowhere last year, but he has proven time and time again he is that good of a player. It wasn't a flash in the pan. I'm not saying he all of a sudden is going to become your starter at right or left back or something, but he is a really good player who's continuing to develop. He's just a gem they found later in the super draft, which doesn't really happen anymore. It's not just a guy that they found that can contribute. He's a really good player. So they just continue to have guys step up as they continue to lose more players. But Métanire and Molino might be back for this game. So both of them and Mueller are all questionable. If you've got those guys back, I kind of feel like Minnesota's going to win. I believe in this team. I love what Adrian Heath is doing. I also picked Philly to win against the mold for the other semifinal. So, hey, might as well pick against what I would consider the favorite again and say Minnesota's going to win. The other interesting part of this, and specifically with Molino, so this is Adrian Heath versus Adrian Heath's old team, and Kevin Molino versus the team that Kevin Molino won an MVP award with in the USL. He was Orlando City for a while, and Adrian Heath was the guy that built this team when they came into MLS. But the difference between Heath's time in Orlando and Heath's time in Minnesota is that Minnesota gave him some grace and didn't pull a quick trigger on him when things didn't go well to start. Both of these were projects, even with a Kaká coming for Orlando. both of these were projects. They were not your LAFC's, Atlanta United's with all this talent coming in expecting to compete right away. And Orlando was just a little impatient with him. And I got mad respect for Adrian Heath that he never wavered in his belief that he knew what he was doing and he knew how to build a team. He just didn't have the time in Orlando. And so I think that's part of why he is so happy when people write off Minnesota, is that people were dismissing this team from day one because they were so bad. But he said it's going to take 3 years to get to a point where we feel like we're ready to compete. And sure enough, year 3, they make the playoffs and they're really good. And you've seen it again here. And he's already, you've got another DP on the way. They're moving. They got more players coming in once this transfer window opens. He's a really good coach and he knows what he's doing and how to build something like this. And so often, you just sort of give up on, in all sports, you give up on coaches so quickly when things don't go well without actually looking at the bigger context of, I just don't think anybody could have expected to succeed in Orlando right away. And you've seen it with the people that have followed him. It's not like it's gotten better since he left. It was not an Adrian Heath problem. It was you're at a talent disadvantage from day one problem because you're an expansion team that doesn't have the splashiness and the flair and the money of Atlanta or LAFC. But now that Minnesota has bought into Heath and given him time, he's got a fantastic team that's unified and ready to go. I think they're gonna do this. I'm gonna say that Portland plays Minnesota in the final, and then we get to the second half of the Europa League here. So Wolves and Olympiacos are tied at 1 going to Molineux. So Wolves have an away goal. You would really hope that they can find a way to put this to bed and get through the quarterfinals, which would potentially set up a Wolves-Manchester United semifinal, which would be phenomenal. Again, like I talked about in the winners and losers on Tuesday, this team is looking at no European competition next year if they don't win this tournament. They're too good for that. They're one of those teams that, and I think Leicester falls into this category next year as well as Spurs. And you've got, your Inter Milans and things like that too. There's a group of teams that enter this tournament every year, whether it's by getting knocked out in the Champions League and finishing third in your group, or having a little bit of a worse domestic season like Spurs did this year, so you only get into the Europa League. But they absolutely, you look at this thing from day one and you go, you can win this, and that's your route back to the Champions League. And to me, Wolves fall in that category. I don't think they can win a Champions League. But when you fall into that second tier, all of a sudden you're not just playing in Europe as the prestige and the excitement that comes with that and the money, but you're also looking at things as a trophy you can win. So, who knows what happens. It's been so long since the first leg. But Wolves are at home where they're comfortable with every opportunity to go through. Then you got Bayer Leverkusen Rangers. Leverkusen is up 3-1 and playing in Germany. Should go through no problem against Steven Gerrard's Rangers, who did well to get to this point. They're just not on the same level. Sevilla Roma, as I mentioned before, is one of those that didn't get to play the first leg. So they're playing a one-off in Germany. Two rather high-profile European teams. I love matchups like this that you get in the Europa League, where, this isn't Barcelona and Juve or Real Madrid and Inter Milan, but these are two really good teams that consistently are. Roma, made a deep Champions League run just a couple seasons ago. These are teams that can play with anybody in Europe. So that's going to be a fascinating matchup. And then finally, Basel is 3-0 and going home. Should be able to see that out against Eintracht Frankfurt, no problem. So that's your Europa League. Yesterday's matchups were probably a little bit more interesting, but some of the bigger teams are on today. So when I was talking about Manchester United, the teams that I look at that feel like they can win this thing, obviously Man U, Inter Milan, Wolves, Leverkusen's got to feel like they at least have a chance, Roma, Sevilla. There are a lot of good teams left in this competition. When it gets to the quarterfinal stages, when you really start to see some exciting matchups and a little bit more of that unpredictability and the thrill that comes with that Champions League of seeing these really good teams from the best leagues in the world play each other. We're not quite at that point yet, but we're getting very close. And then we hop over to Friday and the return of the Champions League. Very exciting. So this is, again, making up and finishing the round of 16 matchups that were not able to play both legs because the shutdown happened in the middle of that round, which made this whole thing very awkward. But thankfully we found a way to resolve it. Europe's been doing much better with COVID, so here we are. Manchester City is playing at the Etihad 2-1 up against Real Madrid. If Manchester City can't find a way to get through here, I think you got to start asking real questions about whether they can ever win a Champions League, in all honesty. And that's not a slight as in you should be able to beat Real Madrid no problem. But you've got 2 away goals, you're 2-1 up. It was a really good City performance in leg 1. And this is why they spend the money. And this is a competition that is wide open. They've got to feel as good about their chances as any other team in this thing. So this is what it's about. And for Real Madrid, apparently Gareth Bale's just not in the squad. It's one of the stranger things in this sport that just defies logic from so many different standpoints. We haven't really talked about it on this show, but why Real Madrid won't let him leave, why he's not anxious to leave, what is the deal with him and Zidane? It just doesn't make any sense. And now he's talking on some golf podcast about how he's confused why Real Madrid fans boo him, as if that's not a thing that happens in every sport everywhere, because fans are irrational. There's a reason that comes from the word fanatic. So that's all very strange, but he's the kind of player you would want to at least have on the bench in this game. You've seen City get exposed at times, and particularly it's that pace and that counter and being able to sort of rip them apart quickly, like Christian Pulisic did, like Wolves did, like Aubameyang did. There's a weakness there that bringing in Nathan Ake is supposed to mitigate and remove to a certain extent, but obviously he's not eligible to play yet. So this team has a flaw, and it seems like Gareth Bale's the kind of player that could really expose that, but Zidane doesn't want him. So we'll see what Real Madrid can do. This is going to be a really fascinating game because it's Real Madrid, Manchester City. These are the matchups you watch the Champions League for. But to me, this is much more about City. This was not, Real Madrid just needed to get back on track. They already won a La Liga. Next year is where you start getting back into the European conversation, I feel like. That this is a multi-step process for Zidane to rebuild everything that fell apart after he left. Your other game, Juventus-Lyon, this one is set up really nicely. Lyon got a 1-0 victory at home, so Juve's got work to do as they return home. It's not been particularly great for Juventus this year. They had a real battle till almost the end in Serie A. It wasn't exactly a stressful one, but like I said, they only won it by a point. And Lazio was causing them some trouble, and then you had that Atalanta dominance and just goal scoring. They weren't head and shoulders above everybody else, is the point I'm trying to make. And so now you've got to go find a way to score some goals. I'm going to still pick Juve to go through, but it's again one of those things where I'm not sold, and we'll get to Barcelona here in a minute, but some of these teams that you usually think about as consistent semifinals, finals performers in this competition, they're just a step behind this year. which is why if I'm Bayern Munich and Manchester City, I feel so good. And PSG as well. Now, the Mbappe injury really hurts that. But some of these teams that haven't quite been able to get over the hump or that haven't been quite at their best in Europe and Bayern Munich the past couple of seasons, this is absolutely there for the taking. And part of that is because Juventus hasn't quite figured it out with Mauricio Sarri this year. And then our other two round of 16 matchups that need to be resolved. Bayern's 3-0 up. I mean, there's probably not going to be a Christian Pulisic for Chelsea, not that it matters. This was never supposed to be a European adventure for Chelsea. It was just an again, going through and winning the Europa League, got them into the Champions League. So you just go give your young guys some experience. They got out of the group stage. It's just not Frank Lampard's fault. This Bayern team is incredible and in great form. They got a tough draw in the round of 16. I mean, they can score goals, so there's always a chance something happens, and Bayern hasn't played for a while. But I would be stunned if this gets interesting at all. And then you have the other sort of intriguing, more entertaining matchup from a score standpoint, which is Barca-Napoli. It was 1-1 in Italy, so Barca is coming home. Aggregate score tied. Messi's been very transparent about his belief that if they don't improve and start playing better, Napoli's going to beat them. And this is one of those weird things for Napoli where, the season hasn't gone to plan domestically, but this is still a team that can absolutely go beat a Barcelona and cause some issues in this tournament. You've seen Roma do it before. You've seen Monaco do it before. Ajax. There's always these past couple of seasons, there's been an unexpected team making the semifinals, and that could absolutely be Napoli this year. So this is a defining game for Barcelona in many aspects, because if you win, all of a sudden your slate is wiped clean, and they could 100% go on to win this tournament through Messi's greatness. And then all of a sudden this season looks very different because you're champions of Europe while having a very frustrating domestic campaign. But if Napoli finds a way to go through here, Barcelona faded in La Liga, didn't win it for the first time in a while, went out in the round of 16 to a team that they should beat in the Champions League. Real questions about the coach. Messi's unhappy. This game and Barcelona's performance moving forward as the Champions League resumes is going to go a long way toward determining what the mood and sort of the vibe is heading into next season. Again, as I mentioned, Arthur has just decided he's not going to play before he moves to Juventus. It's a mess, and so Napoli is looking at it as a real opportunity. If you're going to knock off Barcelona, now's the time. It's just not that scary of a matchup right now. So we'll see what happens there. When we get into next week, we've got the full quarterfinals where your PSGs and your Atalantas and Leipzigs and these teams that have already clinched their spot in the quarterfinals before the COVID outbreak will start playing again. But that's what we've got in terms of Champions League. Final thing I want to mention, the Europa League is back on Monday. So the Manchester United Copenhagen game and Inter Milan versus Rangers of Leverkusen, which will probably be Leverkusen. The first half of our Europa League quarterfinals are on Monday. These things are going to come thick and fast at this point, both Champions League and Europa League. All of these games for the Europa League are going to be in Germany, one leg just like the Champions League. Not traditionally how this is done, but it's just the reality of the world that we're living in right now. You've got to find a way to get people as safe as possible and in and out as quick as possible. I don't necessarily like the idea of one leg. I think it leaves a lot of uncertainty and a lot of room for weird things to happen, which is the same way I am opposed to the new MLS playoff format that they implemented last year that was one-offs all the way through. I like two legs and the ability to be the better team over 180 minutes rather than 90, or to score more goals over 90 minutes, I should say. But that's in a perfect world where there are fans and there aren't safety concerns and things like that. This is just what you have to do. So I'm not. That wasn't a criticism of the way that these two leagues have decided to handle this, and UEFA's decided to handle this for now. But it leaves the door open to weird things happening, like Copenhagen beating a Manchester United, for example. So we'll see what happens there. That's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, subscribe to our newsletter. It comes out tomorrow. Everything happening at 110 Sports. Chris Brown is coming at 1 p.m. Eastern. Talk all things baseball and around the bases. Josh Molnix will be back with his show tomorrow morning. We've got all kinds of good content coming out. We're working on, everything from college basketball to NFL, baseball. You name it, we got it. I will be having both a MLS is back final preview and a Champions League preview once we get past these last round of 16 games and get to the quarterfinals, so be on the lookout for that as well. Thank you so much for listening. That's all we have on Touchline Talk today, and we'll see you Tuesday.